Hello, my name is Paige Garwood, and I want to welcome you to a series of lessons on musical composition. This first series is going to be dealing with musical concepts from the medieval era. Now, it's not the intent to teach an exhaustive course on every aspect of medieval composition. That lies way outside the expertise of this author. The intent, instead, is to give a cursory examination of medieval composition and to extract certain principles that the student can immediately apply to their current efforts at composition. These principles will apply to music composition no matter what genre. To put it in another way, it is not the intent to write exactly as those medieval composers did, but we do wish to emulate them. And that's not the same thing. Not imitation, but emulation. They wrote and they composed in the music and the style of the day. That's the desire of any composer in any generation. It is this author's hope that a few principles can be derived from the medieval composer's efforts that the student can apply to their present-day musical situation. Composition and music theory are tied closely to each other. In fact, it's my opinion that composition is music theory applied. But it must be realized that music theory follows musical efforts. Composers wrote what they heard in their heads and in their hearts. Theorists then dissected those efforts to derive musical principles that future musicians could use as guidelines for their efforts. But these are guidelines. So we will examine a few of these principles and quickly begin to build our own library of musical guidelines that will aid us in our compositional journey. This series of lessons assumes that the student has basic knowledge of note values, time signatures, and key signatures. There will be an information sheet that will be available for download containing all the modes of the medieval era as spoken of in this lesson. The main reference that I'm using for this lesson is a book called COUNTERPOINT, The Polyphonic Vocal Style of the 16th Century, pages 59 through 68, in a section titled Ecclesiastical Modes. The author is Knud Jeppesen, and the publisher is Dover. There will be some basic objectives that I expect the student to accomplish. 1, they will memorize the 4 basic modes and their variants. These modes are the Dorian mode and the Hypodorian mode, the Phrygian and the Hypophrygian, the Lydian and the HypoLydian, the Mixolydian and the Hypomixolydian modes. They will also be expected to define the following terms: tonic, or the finalis, and the tonic and finalis' place in each of the 8 modes just mentioned. The student will also define the dominant or the cofinalis and their place in each of the 8 ecclesiastical modes just mentioned. The student will be expected to explain what an authentic mode is and what a plagal mode is. The activities in this course will be individual basis and a classroom basis. The individual activity, the student will observe the video of this lesson several times throughout the week. In the classroom, the class will actually do what would normally be called the homework. Student will engage in class discussion and will demonstrate their mastery of the objective. The instructor can choose to evaluate the student's mastery of the material via a quiz or just verbal discussion in the class. So let's dive in and get started. Let's talk about the 8 medieval modes. Basically, there are 4 modes, each with a variant, to give us a total of 8. The 4 basic modes are divided into what is called an authentic and a plagal version. Now, with each one of these modes, the authentic and plagal versions, there's going to be 2 notes that dominate each mode. These 2 notes are called the tonic and the dominant. Tonic is the rest note. It signifies the ending of a phrase or the end of a musical section. It's called sometimes the tone of resolution or the finalis. The other note that dominates each mode is something called the dominant. The dominant is also called the tone of suspense, the tone of tension, sometimes called the cofinalis. The tonic and the dominant are the 2 notes that melodies in the medieval modes pivot around. You find that a melody will spend an awful lot of time on this note called the dominant because that's tension. And then it's going to resolve at the end to the tonic. I think you'll understand that better in lesson 2, but just know now that tonic is a tone of resolution or the finalis, the final note. And the dominant is a tone of suspense, the tone of tension. You don't want to stay there. You want to go home to the finalis. So it is sometimes called the cofinalis because it's the other note that melodies wrap around. So let's get to the modes. The very first two modes are the two versions of the Dorian mode. There's the authentic and the plagal version. The notes in the authentic version are D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, with the tonic being D and the dominant being A. Now, mode 2 is what they call the variant of the Dorian mode. It's called the HypoDorian. The notes in the HypoDorian mode are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. The tonic is still D, but now the dominant is F. Modes 3 and 4. These are the two versions of the Phrygian mode. Mode 3 is the authentic version, and the notes in the authentic Phrygian mode are E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and E. Tonic is E, dominant is C. The plagal version of this is called the Hypophrygian, and its notes are B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. The tonic is E, the dominant is A. Modes 5 and 6, these are the versions of the Lydian mode. Mode number 5 is the authentic version, and the Lydian mode, authentic version, notes are as follows: F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and F. The tonic is F, the dominant is C. The sixth mode is the plagal version of the Lydian mode, also called the HypoLydian. Its notes are as follows: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. The tonic is F, the dominant is A. Mode 7 and 8, the last two modes of the medieval era. These were called the Mixolydian modes, and the authentic version of the Mixolydian mode, the notes are G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The tonic is G, the dominant is D. The eighth and final mode is a plagal version of the Mixolydian mode. It is called the Hypomixolydian. Its notes are as follows: D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and D. The tonic is the G, the dominant is the C. If you've been involved in music for any length of time, then you've heard of the term modes. We use them all the time in today's music. We have a Dorian mode, we have a Phrygian, a Lydian, and a Mixolydian, but they're not quite the same things. Let's compare today's modes with the medieval modes. First of all, in medieval era, the Dorian mode was a point of reference: D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. In a modern era, the Ionian mode is our point of reference from which all things evolve. The Ionian mode is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. It's like a C major scale. The Ionian mode is our major scale. But if you notice, these are the same notes that's in the HypoLydian. So today's Ionian mode was the medieval era's HypoLydian mode. Our Dorian and the medieval Dorian, same thing. Our Phrygian and medieval Phrygian, same thing. Lydian for us is the same as Lydian for them. Mixolydian for us is the same as Mixolydian for the medieval era. Our Aeolian was what they called the Hypodorian. Our Locrian is what they called the Hypophrygian. Now, beyond the few differences in names, there are some pretty serious differences. In modern music, it's a given. Tonic is always 1, the first note of each scale, and the dominant is always the 5th degree of that scale. So if we were doing C Ionian, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, the tonic would be C, and the dominant would be G. But that scale in the medieval times, which was called the HypoLydian, let me go back here. The HypoLydian scale, same notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, but its tonic was F and the dominant was A. It's going to sound different. Now, the reason it's going to sound different is the emphasis. In the medieval era, this set of notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, is going to circle around F and A, tonic and dominant. In the modern era, the melodies will circle around its tonic and dominant, which for us is C and G. So even though it's the same set of notes, it's going to come off sounding different to the ear. And as we move along, and you'll see how these modes work, you'll be able to hear that. In medieval times, also, the note B was avoided because of its perceived conflict with an F, which formed a tritone. That was too dissonant, too harsh to the ear, and they tried to avoid it at all times. So for that reason, the Hypophrygian mode wasn't used a whole bunch, so the Hypophrygian was avoided. We'll cover all of that stuff in more detail as we hit these modes in future lessons, but for right now, this is what you're required to know. 4 basic modes: Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. You might be able to remember this if you remember that "don't pinch little monkeys." Dorian, Lydian, Phrygian, spelled with a P, Mixolydian. Don't pinch little monkeys. And each one of those has a variant called Hypo-Dorian, Hypo-Phrygian, Hypo-Lydian, Hypo-Mixolydian. Dorian, the word starts with a D, right? Guess what note it starts on? D. And then Phrygian starts on the next one, E. Lydian starts on F. Mixolydian starts on G. There are hypo versions that starts on the note that's 4 backwards from the beginning note. Let's go down the musical alphabet backwards from D. D, C, B, A. The Hypo-Dorian goes from A to A. Let's think about the Phrygian. It starts on an E, right? Let's count backwards from E. E, D, C, B. Goes from B to B. The Lydian starts on an F. Let's count backwards from F. F, E, D, C. Hypophrygian goes from C to C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Mixolydian starts on a G. Count back 4 from G. G, F, E, D. D to D is the Hypo-Mixolydian. All right, so you need to know what that is. You need to find some way to remember those items. Now you need to also remember each of these 2 versions are called authentic and plagal. Authentic is Dorian. Plagal is the Hypo-Dorian. Authentic Phrygian. Plagal version is Hypophrygian. See the pattern? It's not hard. Every discipline has busy work. This is no exception. You have to have memorized the modes and where the tonic and dominant for each one of these modes are. The next lesson is going to be specifically dealing with the Dorian mode. So you have to have that scale memorized and where its tonic and dominant are. We'll be spending several lessons in the Dorian mode. We're going to learn how to write single note melodies, and then we're going to learn basic counterpoint, and we're going to apply a lot of different principles to the Dorian mode before we ever go on to the other modes. All right, until then, Mr. G out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.